This is what he said.
I didn't wait long. I wanted to make sure, unlike most politicians, that what I said was correct, not make a quick statement. The statement I made on Saturday, the first statement, was a fine statement. But you don't make statements that direct unless you know the fact. It takes a little while to get the facts. You still don't know the facts. And it's a very, very important process to me. And it's a very important statement. So I don't want to go quickly and just make a statement for the sake of making a political statement. I want to know the facts.
President Donald Trump wanted to know the facts. Just let that sink in for a moment. President Trump says he wanted to know the facts. If there is anything we already know about this president, is that he does not wait for facts to become clear before speaking. Has any president in modern history lied so frequently and so fast as this one? But even if the president was really waiting for the facts, in the case of the white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, the facts were plain before, during, and after the bloodshed. A fact the president had at his disposal Saturday while the president was waiting, he says, for all the facts. A fact he had Friday night when they marched. A fact he had weeks before when it became known who would be attending and speaking at the rally. A fact his daughter recognized Saturday when she reportedly urged him to call out these thugs by name. His Jewish daughter, who, by the way, we have not heard from for days, nor from his Jewish son-in-law. The president today, though, preferred to focus on the statues and displaying his grasp of American history.
You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. No, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him?
I do.
Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now, we're going to take down his statue.
So it's hard to know where to begin on that. Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were both slave owners. One wrote the country's founding document. The other led an army to establish it. Neither one did what Robert E. Lee did, which is take up arms against it. Yet they lived together on the same historical plane to this president. And if history doesn't matter, let's try current events. The murder by vehicle of 32-year-old Heather Heyer. Today, the president neither mentioned her nor her mother, Susan Breaux, by name. He did, however, mention that Ms. Breaux had written words of praise about him. He thanked her twice, in fact, without ever mentioning her daughter's name. And when asked whether he will be speaking to her or visiting Charlottesville, he quickly segued to talking about the winery bearing his name.
I own a house in Charlottesville.
Will you go to...
Does anyone know I own a house in Charlottesville?
Where is it?
Oh, boy. It's going to be... It's in Charlottesville. You'll see.
Is it near the winery or something?
It is the winery.
Will you go to visit and try to...
I mean, I know a lot about Charlottesville. Charlottesville is a great place that's been very badly hurt over the last couple of days. I own actually one of the largest wineries in the United States. It's in Charlottesville.
He owns one of the largest wineries. As you might imagine, the president's words, just like his words on Saturday, are drawing fire, including from top Republicans. House Speaker Paul Ryan tweeting, "We must be clear, white supremacy is repulsive. This bigotry is counter to all this country stands for. There can be no moral ambiguity." He's not alone. However, the president is drawing praise from at least one voice. Thank you, President Trump, for your honesty and courage to tell the truth about Charlottesville. That tweet is from white supremacist David Duke. In a moment, three former presidential advisors join us, but first, CNN senior White House correspondent Jim Acosta. Jim, what was that today exactly? I mean, what was that supposed to be, and how did it segue into this press conference unlike any I recall ever seeing?
Anderson, that was a press conference from hell, no question about it. Essentially what happened today, the White House came out to the reporters gathered in the lobby of Trump Tower and said to all of us, listen, the president's going to come down with a couple of his cabinet secretaries. He's going to make some remarks. Then he's going to go back up the elevator into Trump Tower, and these cabinet secretaries will then take your questions. What happened after that is that things, as we've been saying all day long, went completely off the rails because as the president wrapped up his remarks on infrastructure, he was again peppered with questions about this lackluster response to the violence in Charlottesville and these shifting explanations. And the president essentially, as you just pointed out, reverted back to his initial response, blaming both sides for all of this, and then sort of echoing some of the complaints from white nationalists that, well, if you start taking down statues of Robert E. Lee, that statues and monuments to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson will be next. Anderson, I talked to somebody who is familiar with the thinking of Steve Bannon, the president's chief strategist. You heard the president was asked about Steve Bannon and his fate earlier today. The president said, well, he wasn't really sure how things would shake out with Steve Bannon. But Steve Bannon is very much plugged into the alt-right. He used to run Breitbart online, which is obviously a publication that espouses a lot of these white nationalist views. And according to this source, who is familiar with this thinking that is really prevalent in Bannon world, the president is torn inside this White House between two rival factions, one representing Jared and Ivanka and other more moderate-leaning people inside the White House, and Steve Bannon, who really represents this base that, according to this source, Trump does not want to offend. And so I think that's why you saw in this very strange, bizarre, surreal press conference, the president defending these views of the alt-right and was really damning the torpedoes from anybody else. Now, I can tell you there do not appear to be many regrets inside the White House about this evening, Anderson. In just the last few moments, I was told by a Republican source that a messaging memo is going around to Trump surrogates tonight telling them to emphasize that both sides, in the view of the White House, acted irresponsibly in Charlottesville. Anderson, that is a very clear indication that there are no regrets coming from the president's inner circle. He's beyond doubling down and tripling down. I don't know if you can call it quadrupling down, but they are firmly cemented in this view that the president's initial response to all of this in Charlottesville was the correct one.
So what about his statement yesterday in which, he did what many people had wished he had done on Saturday? I saw someone on Twitter referring to that as, just like a hostage video. I mean, was that just someone else gave him a script to read from off the teleprompter, and today he's just expressing his real thoughts? I mean, clearly today he's expressing his real thoughts because there was no teleprompter. These weren't written remarks. Absolutely. This was what he actually thinks in his head. So was yesterday just a lie?
That's right. Yesterday was forced. It was not heartfelt, Anderson. I was in the room with the president. You could see that on his face. And what you saw today inside Trump Tower, I was there for Trump Tower, obviously earlier today. You could see his chief of staff, John Kelly, waiting off to the side with his arms folded, looking down at the floor. There were no attaboys. There was no backslapping and high fives after this performance from the president inside Trump Tower. And just to give you an indication as to how Republicans are feeling about this tonight, Anderson, I talked to a top Republican congressional source who said tonight that the president's ability to effectively govern this country is, quote, dwindling by the hour. So clearly, Anderson, the Republican Party is losing patience with the president tonight. But if they don't really do anything about it, Anderson, this is really becoming the party of Trump, not the party of Lincoln. Anderson.
Chip Acosta, thanks. I want to bring in three people with decades of White House experience between them. Van Jones, David Axelrod, former senior advisors to President Obama. David's also the host of the Axe Files here on CNN. And senior political analyst David Gergen, who's worked closely with Republican and Democratic presidents dating back to the Nixon administration. David Gergen, first of all, how did you view what the president said today, specifically, basically reversing himself from what he said yesterday and going back to what he had said on Saturday?
I must tell you, Anderson, after watching presidents for a long, long time, I was really shocked by today's performance on two grounds. One is that, and on the issue itself of Charlottesville, he so clearly is wrong. He so clearly sees the world differently than most of us do, and in creating once again an equivalence between the neo-Nazis and people who came to protest what the neo-Nazis are saying. That's just so. It's so unacceptable to masses of people in this country. I'm shocked that he went back there. But, Anderson, the bigger question for me, the harder question, the one that is more worrisome, is what's going on inside Donald Trump. This is a man with such massive insecurities. We haven't seen anybody in the White House with such massive insecurities since Richard Nixon. And I think increasingly people feel he's posing a danger not just to his party, but to the country. And, he's going to tear us apart.
You really think he poses a danger to the country?
This is a tough night. What's that?
You really, I mean, that's a strong statement for someone who's worked for both Republicans and Democrats in the White House. You really believe the President of the United States, Donald Trump, is posing a danger to the country?
I believe when I worked for Richard Nixon, that ultimately he needed to leave office, just as most of my colleagues did at the Nixon White House. We thought he was posing a threat, and to leave him there, given the violation of the laws, you simply couldn't do that. I don't think we're there yet with Donald Trump, but I do think there is an issue about his insecurities and where they may lead. As we saw the real Donald Trump today, the unapologetic, unmasked Donald Trump. Yesterday was a fake Donald Trump. That's apparent now, and we see a man who lashes out, who can't control himself, and he's only a short way away from the nuclear button. He's the man who tells whether to go to war or not. So yes, I think that there's some dangers here to the country.
David Axelrod, I mean, we've seen time and time again this president stepping on the White House's own message. Today was a day where there were a lot of positive things that the president could have been talking about. North Korea seemed to have blinked on the whole issue of Guam. The president wanted to talk about infrastructure, the stock market at a high. And yet, is this probably one of the worst days for this president you've seen?
Yeah, it's hard to rate them, but you'd have to say so. I would love to have been a fly on the wall in General Kelly's after-action meeting on the infrastructure event. I don't think it went very well. But look, Michelle Obama said in her convention speech last summer that the presidency doesn't change people, it reveals who they are. And as you said at the outset, this is who Donald Trump is. This is who he was throughout the 2016 campaign. There was this hope that somehow the presidency, with all its responsibility and all the majesty and gravity of it, would change him. He's not going to change. What we saw yesterday was a hostage video. He practically blinked out in Morse code. I don't believe a word of what I'm saying. And today he did. We saw his true character. We saw his true views. He gave aid and comfort to neo-Nazis, to these white nationalists, and they rewarded him with praise, as you point out. The question for the Republican Party is not just whether they're going to put statements out condemning this particular incident, but are they going to go after the issue of this element within their own party, and how are they going to move forward, not just dealing with Donald Trump, but dealing with the forces that have propelled Donald Trump. Unlike Richard Nixon, who David worked for, Donald Trump's not a creature of the Republican Party. I don't think he cares much what the establishment Republicans think. That alt-right group, that's his base, and he's clearly catering to it.
Van, I just want to read again what David Duke tweeted after the president's remarks today. Thank you, President Trump, for your honesty and courage to tell the truth about Charlottesville and condemn the leftist terrorists in BLM and Antifa. We don't know what the president's motive is, but we can surely say his words have absolutely emboldened white supremacists.
It's a tough night. I think for normal people, you got a lot of people at home going through Kleenex right now. You got a lot of people at home who are keeping their kids away from TV tonight because we're spiraling away from each other. We're spiraling away from each other. And you want the president to be the person who comes and grabs us by the hands and pulls us back together and reminds us what this is all supposed to be about. And instead, he's picking a fight. Even if he's right, which he's wrong, he's picking a side in a food fight, even if by his own understanding. And he's actually cheerleading for one side and defending one side. He's not defending the humanity of the people who were run over. There are 19 people who were run over. He's not telling their story. He's not defending their humanity. And he can't draw basic distinctions. He would flunk second grade. He can't distinguish between the founder of our country, who was a flawed individual, but who did great things, and the person who led a rebellion against this country. Robert E. Lee should not be in the same sentence as George Washington. He can't distinguish between Nazis with torches saying anti-Jewish, anti-black stuff, who went there chanting things that people died by the millions in the last century over. He can't distinguish between them and the people who went there to try and defend people from those thugs.
Yeah, I keep wondering, Van, he's surrounded by military people. H.R. McMaster, who's had an incredible career in the U.S. Army. The U.S. Army fought the Nazis in Europe. Kelly, who was a Marine. Most of the Marines were in the Pacific Theater, but there were Marines fighting against the Nazis in Europe as well. What do these people who are surrounding him think? Ivanka Trump, what I mean,
Yeah, I mean, for me,
Jared Kushner, what are they thinking?
I don't know, but I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking about my godmother, Dottie Zollner, who's Jewish. I think about what she's gone through in her life, sticking up for civil rights. The stories that she's told me about her family and the things that her family suffered in Europe, and the fact that she can't count on the President of the United States to stand with her when a Nazi ran over an American citizen, killed an American citizen with ISIS tactics in our country. And my godmother can't come on the television and see the President of the United States show any sympathy for her, the father of a Jewish daughter. I mean, this is not funny. It's not cute. It's not a soundbite war. At a certain point, you have a lot of people now. It's not just the people you're emboldening. It's the people you're abandoning, who now don't know if they have a government that gives a damn about them. Those are the people you have to worry about too, because we're spiraling away from each other. We're spiraling away from each other. And I don't know what to say tonight. I usually have something clever, something smart. I'm just hurt. I'm sitting here hurt. And I think a lot of people are hurt tonight.
You feel this personally?
Well,
I do, and I know David does. I know all of us do. Everybody's trying to hold it together tonight.
I'm the son of a Jewish refugee, so yes, I feel it strongly. But here's the thing. How many times are we going to sit here and say we're disappointed in the President of the United States? We're disappointed that we don't have a president who's going to stand up and provide the moral leadership that the country deserves. At some point, we have to conclude it's not coming. It's not coming. He's throwing kerosene on the fire. He's exploiting our divisions, and it's up to the rest of us to pull together, to defy that, to say we're better than that, to rise above that. I'm tired of saying that Donald Trump has disappointed us. Donald Trump is who he is. He's not going to change. This was definitive proof of that today.
Yeah. David, thank you. David Gergen, Van Jones, thank you. There are many more aspects to this to explore, including the president's claim that he's all about having the facts before he speaks, the deeply freighted history of war monuments, the civil war and race in this country, the president's claims about violence on both sides, and more. The panel joins us as well as we continue.
Hey Siri, set a timer for 10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes.
Talking about the president's off-the-cuff press conference today at Trump Tower and his insistence that he did not speak out against the racists and neo-Nazis in Charlottesville on Saturday because, as he put it, he was waiting for the facts. Here again is that moment.
It was very important to me to get the facts out, and correctly. I couldn't have made it sooner because I didn't know all of the facts. It takes a little while to get the facts. I had to see the facts. I want to know the facts. I want the facts. I wanted to see the facts. Before I make a statement, I need the facts. You don't make statements that direct unless you know the fact. I want to make a statement with knowledge. I wanted to know the facts. Okay.
President Trump claiming he likes to know the facts. The impromptu press event began with a question about CEOs leaving a presidential advisory panel in manufacturing in the wake of Charlottesville. That number tonight now stands at 6. I want to bring in the panel: Tara Setmayer, Scott Jennings, Kirsten Powers, Charles Blow, Paris Denard, Paul Begala. Charles, where are you at tonight?
It's part of me is not responding the way other people are responding, because part of me wants to say to America, where have you been? What were you reading? What were you listening to? Why does this take you by surprise? I've been howling into the wind since before the election that this man is a bigot, that this man is a misogynist, that this man is a bully, and people like me and other people saying the exact same thing, that this thing, you have to ask yourself a very profound question, whether or not Trump is an articulation of them, or whether he is an articulation, whether he's an articulation of them or they are an articulation of him. Or is there some symbiotic relationship happening here where they are feeding off of each other? I mean, the Republican Party has to ask itself, America has to ask itself a question. These people exist. There's a lot of negative, racialized energy well short of vehicular homicide and people shot in the Nazis industry. If you know full well that the war on drugs has a disproportionate impact on black people and you support it, where does that place you? If you know that mass incarceration is devastating black communities and you support it, where does that put you? If you know that stripping the votes or voter suppression is having a negative impact on some people and therefore increasing the power to vote of other people, and you support that, where does that put you? America has to ask itself some really profound questions about what white supremacy actually is, because it is not simply animus. There are people, there were abolitionists who hated the idea of slavery and yet had no concept or will to entertain the idea that black people were equal to them. There are people who today detest the violence in Charlottesville and yet do not believe that black people are equal to them. That is what white supremacy is. That is what it is. And so once you order people, once you make a hierarchy of people, once you devalue some people and lift others, that allows you to do things.
Paris, as a supporter of the president, how is it that this president, yes, yesterday he gave this teleprompter speech in which he renounced neo-Nazis and KKK and white supremacists. Today, he's saying that the people who were rallying around the Robert E. Lee statue on Friday night with tiki torches, of all things, chanting, Jews will not replace us, blood and soil, calling the counter-protesters, the small group of counter-protesters who were there, calling them faggots. How do you defend that? How do you defend the president for what he said today? Those people, he was saying that they were just quietly protesting a statue.
Well, the interesting thing, Anderson, that I saw in the Vice clip of the entire night, the 1-minute clip that you showed from that entire night on Friday, was that there was actually people on the other side chanting Black Lives Matter. Remember seeing that? They were saying,
how dare they? Is that what you're saying? What?
I'll finish my comment.
Okay.
My point is, there were other people there that night that were not saying all the things that you were saying.
There were a couple there were a couple of dozen counter-protesters who had surrounded the statue when the several hundred guys with tiki torches arrived, and they basically were overwhelmed, and then the police came once they were already chased off.
The only point I'm making, Anderson, is that everybody there Friday night were not doing the things that you're saying that majority of them were doing.
Look, there's hundreds of people with tiki torches
Anderson,
chanting,
it's very simple.
Jews will not replace us. So there's some quiet people walking with them?
The only point I'm making is this. When the Black Lives Matter, and let me start off by saying I am not equating Black Lives Matter to anything of these neo-Nazis, fascists, and white supremacists. But the point is there was a strong push in the media and a lot of people saying, well, when you see the Black Lives Matter people saying F the police, burning cars, and doing this, the pushback would say that was a small fragment of those people. The majority of the people who were there were peaceful, were quiet, and were angry at the situation. So only point I'm making now is that, yes, in the Vice clip that you just showed, there were people chanting Black Lives Matter and were on the other side of the people there. So it is unfair to characterize everybody there as neo-Nazis.
What you're saying literally makes no sense. I'm not characterizing the Black Lives Matter people as neo-Nazis.
No,
there were a small group of them, mostly UVA students and their supporters, who were around the statue when the neo-Nazis arrived. It's the people with tiki torches that the president is talking about as just being quiet, good people who are just there to protest the statue. And that's just, they're friggin' chanting, Jews will not replace us on the streets of America.
Of the event said it was a pro-white demonstration. That's what those people were there to do. So why are you acting like it's just a few random bad apples? These people are... Yes, you are. You're saying because there was somebody there saying Black Lives Matter, which is a perfectly appropriate thing to say because they do.
That's what I was saying.
But they don't. But these people were there organized to do a pro-white demonstration with David Duke and Richard Spencer. I mean, where do you not condemn this? I mean,
how do you say I'm not condemning it?
Did you? I didn't hear you condemn it.
Reaction, Paris, was to come out and find a talking point spin.
No, there wasn't
on this. It is,
no,
and that's the part that's about this. That's the part you got your shot. The part about this that bothers me, about the conservatives that are trying to spin this and come out, and even friends of mine who are trying to cast aside the fact that the President of the United States went on a self-aggrandizing, victim-blaming rant today where he was disgraced the office of the presidency and potentially planted the seed for even more division in this country than we've already seen today. And shame on you, Paris, and everybody else that's coming out here today. Shame on the staffers in the White House that are still standing behind President Trump and trying to spin this into it was Charlottesville's fault. It was a couple of Black Lives Matter people's fault. I have issues with Black Lives Matter. I have issues with Antifa. They've done some horrible things and said horrible things too, but they didn't kill anyone on Saturday. They don't have the history that neo-Nazis and white supremacists do in this country. And for people to come out, and that's the default position that they take when the President of the United States made it about him, he made it about his grievances, he gave the alt-right and these white supremacists a platform to praise him. Shame on you, shame on the President, and shame on anybody that continues to enable him in this respect.
Anderson, I'll tell you what I'm hearing from Republicans tonight, and that is a very simple message for the President. Mr. President, we want to be with you in policy, but you are making it impossible for us to be with you in spirit. Moral clarity is required of the office of the President because that is the spirit of being an American, knowing that the rest of the world looks to our country and our President to provide absolute, unequivocal moral clarity. You cannot say that there are good people standing in this rally because if a good person left their house and went to this event and showed up, and the person next to them was holding a Nazi flag and they chose not to go home, then by definition, they checked their good person card at the gate. So the only people left at the rally were not the good people. And to try to say that there was a smattering of bad people mixed in with good people absolutely vacates the moral clarity required of the office of the President. We are not the party of Robert E. Lee. We are not the party of Jefferson Davis. We are the party of Abraham Lincoln. We revere George Washington. We are the party of Dwight Eisenhower, who defeated the Nazis. So, the message I hear from Republicans tonight, Mr. President, do not make it impossible for us to support you. You have an agenda. The Republican Party largely supports your policy agenda. Don't render it inoperable.
But the problem there is that, Paul, but the problem there is that beginning in the late 60s and early 70s, they were the party of racial division, right? These are not like things that you can't find. They were, Nixon's top aides were literally going to newspapers and magazines and giving on-the-record interviews. One top aide gave an interview to Harper's Bazaar where they said, our enemies, this is 1968, our enemies are blacks and hippies who are anti-war. Now, we can't make laws to outlaw blacks and hippies, but we can associate in the mind of the public hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and we can punish those crimes to the point that we break those communities. That's a quote from Harper's Bazaar. 2 years later, another Nixon aide gives an interview to the New York Times, and he says, we want more blacks to register as Democrats because the Negrophobes, that was his word, will flock to the Republican Party. That was a Southern strategy. That's my lifetime, right? So I'm born in 1970. That interview is given in 1970. The entire history of my life is surrounded by the idea of people accommodating these people and putting a better face on them. I just came back from Louisiana. No, that isn't. I'm not saying the whole of anything. Nothing is ever the whole. But you're going to I'm sorry, babe.
You got to be fair about this.
I didn't interrupt you. I'm going to finish. 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 I just came back from Louisiana. David Duke is prominent in this story. David Duke was elected to the Louisiana House. And then he ran again for governor of the state, and he won most of the white vote in Louisiana. And the platform that David Duke ran on and the bills that he proposed when he was in the legislature are no different than the Republican bills that they do now. No, I'm sorry.
Charles,
that is true.
And the Democrat platform in for something. You can't sit there and blame the Republican Party for all racism in America and leave out the history of Democrat racism.
You have some magazines you want to quote?
It was the Democrat. How about the Democrat platform in 1924 that wasn't against the Jim Crow law, against anti-lynching? What about Taney, who wrote Dred Scott? He was a Democrat. I mean, we can go through this. That is not what we're talking about tonight. Let's be fair about that.
I'm fair about that.
Paul.
We come to this with a great deal of history. Jefferson, a slave owner, said that slavery was a fire bell in the night. More recently, Bill Bradley, the senator from New Jersey, said it was our original sin. And we've never gotten over it in America. We're still wrestling with it tonight. But I think, Charles, what's different, this is not Richard Nixon with dog whistles. This is Donald Trump with a foghorn. This is a bullhorn. This is not... Say what you will about the recent history of Republicans on race. And I grew up in Texas, and I've been fighting them all my life. This is different. I mean, Ronald Reagan disavowed the Ku Klux Klan in 1984 when they endorsed him. Eisenhower, as Scott pointed out, not only defeated the Nazis in battle, he opposed Joe McCarthy. George H.W. Bush, when David Duke was in the legislature and running for governor, George H.W. Bush disavowed him. This is no longer Republican versus Democrat. This is Nazis versus Americans. This is freedom versus fascism. And the moral blindness that our president showed, willful moral blindness today, was unlike anything I've ever seen in American politics.
Yeah, but if that person gets elected is nominated as the Republican nominee, then what does that say? I'm sorry, you can't divorce him from them. There is no way to do that. There is no way to do that. You can't say we can't both siderism this thing out. We can't both say, well, this is not, a left-right issue. If the person you just described was the Republican nominee and then now is president of the United States and most white people in America voted for that person, what does that say? I'm sorry. There is no way to wiggle out of that.
We got to take a break. I'm sorry. Coming up, Trump blamed so-called both sides for violence, the white supremacists and those who protested against their hate. We'll play more of what he said. We'll hear from Dr. Cornel West, who was actually there at the rallies. We'll be right back.
Here's to the safety first. I think I might burst. Totally immersed weekenders.
Whatever kind of weekender you are, there's a Hilton for you.
Book your weekend break direct with Hilton.com and join the summer weekenders.
The Squirrel Sisters came over last night. Man, they got crazy. Those girls, they know how to party. And they'll do anything for pistachios. And I mean anything. Stuff I don't ever want to think about again, but I'm an elephant. I can't forget.
Howdy. Hey. Here we go. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
That's not your car.
Car's ready.
Wrong car.
Is not your car?
I would love to take it, but no.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. You guys want to check it out?
Someone else's car.
This is beautiful. What is this?
It's the all-new Chevy Equinox.
This feels like a luxury SUV.
I love this little 360. How do they even do that?
I made a bad decision on my last car purchase.
Well, your car's here.
Bummer. Bummer.
Wah, wah. I'm ready for an upgrade.
Somewhere along the great journey of self-discovery, a breakthrough. It's in our nature to need each other.
Unlimited is only as good as the network it's on. And only one network can be the best. Verizon, just named #1 in the nation by RootMetrics, the largest independent study in call, data, speed, and reliability, and awarded #1 overall network for the 8th time in a row. Because only Verizon has the best network and the best unlimited.
There's a more vivid window into your games with a stunning 4K display and graphics that bring them to life.
Peter, you still with us?
The Dell Inspiron 157000 Gaming. Dell, as real as it gets.
Country was a huge part of my life, all because of Garth Brooks.
Artists like George Strait or Brooks and Dunn.
The Dixie Chicks, Shania Twain.
Plenty of acts really worked their way up and became massive.
The 90s, Sunday at 9.
When we were rebuilding our new store right here on Commercial Drive in the Big Apple Plaza, we called Harry G for pricing on an HVAC system.
Time is very important, and when a technician is supposed to be there, he is there with Country Suburban.
Harry G did a great job, the prices were very competitive, and the service was second to none.
In my experience, Harry G has been able to handle any situation at my home or at my business.
Find out for yourself why Country Suburban has earned the reputation for doing the job right the first time.
Working at Tradewinds is both challenging and enriching. We work with students with complex disabilities, teaching and supporting their learning and development. Upstate Cerebral Palsy provides the resources professionals need in an environment that is student-focused. Come join us in educating and supporting our students as they move to the next level of independence for their future, for their lives.
CNN Special Report, Twitter and Trump, Friday night at 9.